Okay.
Wake up. Here we go.
Wake up.
All right.
Wake up.
Hello and welcome back to Real Talk, the podcast by Realme. My name is Mark.
Hey guys, I'm Rose.
Hey, I'm JJ.
Rose, what are we going to be discussing today?
We're going to talk about the smartphone camera today.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we're talking about smartphone camera. What are some of the discussion points?
We'll go in depth into the camera setup, and then at the end of the podcast, we're going to share with you some of the tips and tricks to make better use of a camera.
What do you think are the most important aspects for like a smartphone camera setup?
To my preference, there will be usually I'll look out for two things. One is the focal length. So does it have a 28mm, 35, or do I have the flexibility? Another one is the sensor size. Definitely the sensor size.
How about you? What do you look at when you look at a
I
camera phone?
used to think it's the sensor, but recently I've also learned it's also related to the processor actually.
Yes. So every chipset that's running on your smartphone comes with ISP. It means image sensor processing.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what it does is that it will process your images.
Is
and
this the
that's-
one to
yeah.
translate the signal to?
Yeah, the signal to wherever you see on
Okay.
the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. So beyond that there's a combination of AI and stuff. That's how when you snap up photos, things all the data comes in, and the processor of course go through some AI algorithm, and then along with the AI the ISP, and then the processor. And then by the end of it, that's where you see your final picture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing that I noticed after kind of getting into the smartphone industry is all of the different megapixels that go with the camera. Like the first to 50 megapixels is 30 megapixels okay? Like all of these debates around how many megapixels does your smartphone camera need? What do you think about that? How many megapixels does your smartphone camera need in order to take good photos for the average person?
I think this comes. Okay, I think I can break down to maybe two different points. So first, it really depends on how the manufacturer or the brands wants to make use of the megapixel. So having more megapixel doesn't always mean the best, but it also comes with some pros, right? So having more megapixel means you are able to physically print out larger physical posters, right? For example, if you have a 15 megapixel, you can print out. Obviously, your printout will be much more clearer than what you have, say, a 12 megapixel. And the another advantage of having more megapixel is you can recompose your shots by cropping it later on without you losing much of the data.
Okay.
But the caveat of that is it has a negative impact on the low light performance, right? Because more megapixel means there are more actual pixels on the sensors, and then in turns it's not able to absorb as much light as say the one with lower megapixel. This is why you see like some of the professional cameras, say Fujifilm is still using like 24 megapixel. Yeah, as opposed to go something crazy with like 108 megapixel.
Yeah.
Right. And also because the traditional mirrorless camera doesn't have smart algorithm like we do on smartphones, so they really depends a lot on the actual physical capability of the sensor more than a smartphone does. So what smartphone does is able to, like, despite having say a 50 megapixel, 100 megapixel, it is able to use a different technique like pixel binning to improve the light intake. So that actually helps in terms of say if you have a smaller sensor.
It seems like for people who kind of get into the lower megapixel in order for low light photography, it needs to be done with maybe more of a specific purpose in mind. Of like, okay, like I know that this camera is capable of taking these kinds of shots, but maybe not capable of taking others, or as good at taking others.
Or just get some of our products like 9 Pro Plus, which is also good at taking low light pictures. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I think like part of it too, like when you were talking about like the Fiji camera, like most people would probably look at the 24 megapixel and be like, why would I get that when they have cameras that have more megapixels and things like that? But it's like for somebody who really knows what they're doing with that camera, it's like, oh, that makes sense. Like that, I could actually use that. Which kind of gets me interested in maybe discussing like what kind of photography style do you have? Maybe you don't have like a dedicated style, but like at least when you're taking pictures, what do you usually take pictures of?
So I kind of feel like picture is sort of the reflection of people's personality. So I do take daylight pictures more because I love the sun. And I tend to capture more colors and also light with shades together.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about you?
I don't know. Like I feel like I'm kind of just the everyman. Like I don't have like a specific plan of action when I take photos. I think when I experience something, I'm kind of, I have the personality type where I'm like fully invested in what I'm experiencing around me. I actually don't take as many pictures as I probably should. I remember like when I was in college and stuff, like we have, at that time, I think Facebook was even more popular than it is now. But people always joked and made fun of me. They're like, Mark, if Facebook didn't let people tag people in photos, like we wouldn't even know you existed, because like I would never upload my own photos, but people could figure out like what I'm up to and what I'm doing based on the images that I'm tagged in. But I was always that person who never pulled out their phone or their camera to take photos. But I'm getting more into it, I guess. Like, but I still don't have like a style. I don't have like a idea of what I'm taking a picture of. But like if the thought occurs to me, then I try to take a picture.
Okay.
How about you?
Well, personally, I do a little bit of street photography. So I do have my own, dedicated camera for that. But these days, camera has become so good, and I don't know, I just become lazy to bring so many equipments around with me all the time. I tend to just use my smartphone. And I think this works especially well in daylight. You have enough lighting, and whatever snaps you do, it probably looks good enough.
Yeah.
And then when it comes to low light conditions, or like at night, this is where it really tests the capability of your smartphones. So like for instance, I think last month I was using 9 Pro Plus for a while, and one of the favorite feature that I really love about the 9 Pro Plus is the street photography mode.
Okay.
That's something that I use a lot. Specifically the pick and zoom feature. I know this might sound a bit geeky, but I do like to have control over what I focus, rather than giving up the control to the camera. And I feel that I have more control over how the photo will look, because I have control over what I want to focus on. Yeah.
I see. I think that it's a kind of a good point to start moving towards our next topic, which was the role of software in smartphone photography. Like there is a lot that the hardware can do in terms of establishing a really good foundation for your photos. But I think most people, in order to get that final cut, are utilizing software of some sort, and then also the performance of the camera itself before you even get into like post editing. There is software within the phone itself that is happening while you're using the camera. So what can you kind of tell us about the relationship between software and hardware?
Well, so again, this really depends on different brands. Because when it comes to software, tuning, it depends on the taste of the developer.
Yeah.
Right. So whether the shots will have more saturation or it looks flatter, or what kind of look. It sort of we sort of give a little bit more control to the software algorithm, and this is why you sort of have that the Realme look, the whatever Samsung look, and etc. So it I think we have come so. I think it's also I think it is a good thing, because it comes to a point where if you look at certain photo, you can tell that this is probably shot on certain brand, versus say, I don't know, 5 years ago, where each company are still trying to figure out what is their picture style, and then I think by now most company will sort of have their sort of prioritization. So for example, in Realme, we sort of prioritize contrast more than the other. So if you use our camera, the software usually bump up the saturation and the contrast, and obviously we'll do something with the dynamic range, and so the overall tonality that you have with the shots on your Realme smartphones usually will look much more poppy. Poppy, if that's a word.
It pops out.
It pops out. I just invented a new word, poppy. Usually for me, I will just go to the Pro mode and have, again, more control over what I want to shoot and how I want to look like.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we still want the photographer to get out what they put in, right? Like if they have more knowledge or awareness of how to utilize a camera and all of its features, we want to be able to give that capability to them. And I also know from working in the community and having discussions with the people in our community, our fans, that they have conversations with us about what they appreciate in photography and smartphone cameras, and that's an ongoing conversation, which I think is awesome.
Most of our fans really love the street the street filter. I believe that's a term. Yeah, that's why they come up with even the updated street filter 2.0. So I'm just glad our fans actually enjoys it too and come up with new ideas on that.
Exactly. That's what I mean by like an ongoing conversation, is like we look at our fans' response to the features that we put into our new phones and see like, okay, like you said, the street filter mode is super popular, and so we want to keep enhancing that and making that a feature of our phones.
Right.
But is there saying like whether the hardware is more important or the software is more important?
I think it goes hand in hand.
Okay.
Like, say having either of them, it doesn't stand by itself.
Okay.
So I think it is a complementary. So having a great hardware, it needs to pair with like really solid software, and having really solid software, you need the hardware to showcase whatever it needs to showcase. Yeah.
I think of it, I mean, maybe I'm totally off on this, but in my mind, the way I've conceptualized it is that the hardware is the foundation of what you're building. Like, that's the stuff that needs to be laid strongly in order to build on top of it. Because the software wouldn't mean very much if there wasn't a good foundation that it's being utilized on. I mean, you can use software to try to make up for bad hardware, but it can only take you so far, and then eventually people will run into the challenges that exist when the hardware is bad. But it is a relationship between the two of them.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of kind of bridging off of like the street filter mode and kind of talking about low light photography that's being featured, especially in our 9 Pro Plus, which I know that you have a lot to say because you were the spokesperson for that. And we want to show kind of a video of one of our influencers utilizing the low light photography and giving tips and tricks. But what was kind of the original inspiration for focusing on low light photography, and then kind of how do you make the most of it?
So the original idea of why we want to focus on low light photography on 9 Pro Plus is we saw the gap between flagship camera and not a flagship camera, right? So usually, say your $1,000 smartphones, most of them, they perform really well in low light situation. I mean, it's expected because you pay $1,000 for it.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to more affordable smartphones, range, this is where most brands fall short at. Is the in the low light department. So we saw the gap and we think that we can do better. So we purposefully pick a Sony IMX766 as the core camera sensor for 9 Pro Plus. And with that foundation, we threw in a lot of new technology. One of them is the AI noise reduction engine 3.0. So this is our third iteration of the noise reduction algorithm, and it works really well. So I think we are not there yet, but definitely we are closing the gap.
Mm-hmm.
So through software updates or through basically software updates.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Yeah. Have you ever messed around with low light photography?
Just for a few times, but I do see a lot of really positive feedback from our fans of those who actually tried the camera of 9 Pro Plus, and they all really enjoyed it, especially for the low light photography.
That's something that I still need to explore, is the low light photography. And thankfully, we actually have a video for you guys to show you one of our influencers utilizing low light photography, somebody that I would say is very good at it. And maybe you guys can get some inspiration from seeing what the work that he's done. So his name is Aishi, and this is a video from him.
When the night falls, I get out to explore and capture the city with my own vision to bring my images to life. Hi, I'm Aishi, professional photographer and night photography specialist, and today I'm going to share 3 tips for creating interesting nightscape with smartphone Redmi 9 Pro Plus. Okay, now it's time to give you my first advice. Make depth. When it's dark, you can find plenty of elements to make your photograph interesting. Compose your image by adding elements or props in foreground to create depth. It can be a light source, reflective object like a prism. Just be creative. You can enable the grid in your phone's option to help you balance the element in your image. Don't hesitate to turn around your subject to identify the best point of view. Advice number 2. Use a tripod. Get a tripod, we're going to do some long exposure shot. Choose an exposure time of several seconds like 3 or 4 and set the ISO to a minimum. You will capture more details and get a very clean result with a lighter visible noise in your image. Advice number 3. Use expert mode. If you want to obtain the best results and control all aspects of your capture, this mode allows you to independently manage each function of the camera setting. First, set the shutter speed, then the ISO, and finally the white balance to give a warmer or colder atmosphere to your image. Feel free to experiment with different settings. To go even further in color, I also like to edit my pics with Lightroom or VSCO and playing with the different settings. To get a cyberpunk look, set the white balance to cold tones, add contrast and saturation. The important thing is to keep a balance of color by finding the right harmony between red, blue and purple. You can also use the filters built into your Realme 9 Pro Plus. With its Sony IMX766 sensor, bigger to capture more light, its noise reduction engine 3.0 and upgraded artificial intelligence which reduces the noise in your photo, and its optical and electronic stabilization, it produces clear night photo, even in low light condition. It will be your perfect partner for your nocturnal exploration. There are thousands of atmospheres to capture. It's up to you to create your own, and I'm just using your Realme 9 Pro Plus smartphones.
Okay, so I hope you guys enjoyed that video. We're going to be moving on to our final segment of the podcast, which is Realdoll Legend. We had originally for the first 2 episodes, it was just Realdoll, and it was kind of like, I don't really know like how we're going to make this a competition. And then we got inspiration from the racing legend from the Neo 3 and turned Realdoll into Realdoll Legend. And so last week was me and Rose.
Congrats again.
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking for that. But this week, I'm going to be sitting out and officiating JJ versus Rose. So you guys should already have the link to the word.
Okay.
So just a quick refresher on the rules. We always start with the first guess being realme, as REALME. If the letter is yellow, that means that the letter is correct, but in the wrong place. If the letter is green, you have the correct letter and the correct place. And if it's gray, then it's all wrong. All right. And you get 6 guesses to get the answer. 3, 2, 1.
Ready. Go! Round 1.
So the winner is JJ.
Yay!
Congratulations. It was almost a victory for Rose. So there you go. That was Realdoll Legend. We have another winner today. And so that was it for our conversation for smartphone photography. Obviously, there's more to talk about, but we look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. So Rose, where can people find us?
Feel free to find us on YouTube, of course.
And JJ, how often are we doing this podcast?
Once a week.
All right, yeah. So you guys can look forward to seeing us again next week. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Bye-bye.